First City Focus is supported in part by Duke Energy, powering the lives of its customers and communities. Online at duke-energy.com. Andy Ellerman of First City Wealth, serving Vincennes and surrounding communities to help with investing and planning for your future before and during retirement years. First City Wealth online at firstcitywealth.com. Colonial Assisted Living. Colonial is an assisted living residence promoting independence and dignity for each resident while providing the necessary assistance for daily living. Colonial Assisted Living, 1622 South Hart Street Road in Vincennes, 812-895-1504. And by donations contributed by Vincennes PBS viewers like you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to First City Focus. I'm your host, Dave Foster, and on this episode, we'll visit with local economic development leaders on the impact good housing has on a community. We'll learn about a Civil War era train crash that happened in Shoals, and we'll take a trip to the Knox County Watermelon Festival and to the Brown County Park Snake Fest. All of that coming up right now on First City Focus. Housing is one of the most talked about needs in Knox County, and for good reason. Local leaders have been working to turn talk into action, offering incentives and launching new projects. But housing isn't just about where people live, it's also part of economic growth. And here to talk more about that connection is Chris Pfaff, the CEO of Knox County, Indiana Economic Development. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Good morning, Dave. You. Yeah, appreciate it.
So first, just briefly describe what your office is and what its function is.
So Knox Economic Development, previously known as KCDC, is Knox County, Indiana Economic Development. The organization has been around since the early 80s, so we've been part of the community for a long time. And I always describe to people that there are three major focus areas that I think an economic development office should be involved in. The first and probably foremost is business retention and expansion. So basically working with our existing companies throughout the county to help them grow, knock down barriers to growth, help with workforce development and things like that. And then secondly is business attraction. So we're always promoting Knox County as a good place to do business and offer good job opportunities for our residents, for example. And this is very simplistic, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And then third is entrepreneurship. And of course, we partner and have an excellent partner in the Pantheon, and so we're fortunate to have them in place. But I serve on the board of the Pantheon as well, and our two organizations are very closely aligned because that's part of our mission is to help support entrepreneurship as well. But those are really the three big buckets I would describe as what our office does. But to the topic for today, what that has done over the last, if we were here 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't be talking about housing because housing was just something that the market took care of, and economic developers didn't necessarily get involved in that topic. But for a number of reasons, probably dating back to the, probably early 2000s, I'm guessing, that started shifting, and then with the recession of 2008 and beyond, I think that had a negative impact on the amount of housing units being built. And then of course we came into the pandemic recently, and that just sort of exacerbated the problem. And so you'll find that myself and my counterparts are very concerned about housing, specifically because it has an impact on workforce development.
Right. And it's been a while back now, but there was a housing study done for Knox County. So kind of recap what that showed us. Yeah,
so thank you for pointing that out. So we partnered in 2021, so it's been more than 4 years ago when this started. And so the hospital, the university, our office, the city and the county, and the Redevelopment Commission all came together to help pay for this study. And there were a number of things that came out of that. And some of them included the fact, and this isn't new news necessarily, but we've been losing population in Knox and in Vincennes for decades, really. At one time, Knox County boasted more than 44,000 residents. I think that was in the 1960s. So since then, and especially since the 1980s, our population has continued to go the wrong direction. And because of that, you know, our core mission is to help improve the economy of Knox County, and that includes, you know, things like, you know, business investments, job opportunities, average wages for workers, things like that, that all have a positive impact. But population decline is probably the number one thing that has a negative effect on our local economy. And so it's really been, I think, it doesn't necessarily feel like this when it's so gradual, but it really is a crisis for the local economy. And if there's one thing that our office could do, it's to help solve that issue of population decline. Yeah. But some of the other things that came out of the study, in addition to that, included things like looking at commuting patterns. There are more than 3,000 workers that drive into Knox County every day for work. Mm-hmm. Half of them come from Illinois. And so one of the other things is that 90% of our housing stock was built prior to 1990, which means that you know, only 10% is 30 years old or less. And when you think about the maintenance and the upkeep of whether it's an apartment building or a single family home, that leads to a lot of maintenance and a lot of renovation. I mean, you can imagine the kitchens and the bathrooms in these housing units, that many of which may not have been you know, replaced in the last 30 years. And so that has an impact on people's decision on where to live. And so we're talking about not just quantity, but quality as well. And I think everybody recognizes that we have a much older housing stock than a lot of the communities in our region. And then I would say probably the thing that I think surprised me the most is that in the year that we studied the number of demolitions versus the new housing permits, we were literally tearing down more homes than we had permits to build new. So not only were we not making progress in new housing, we were actually at a net deficit in the number of housing units in the community, which I think was pretty striking. And then I'll just finish by saying that the conclusion of the study was that if Knox County is going to grow and improve its population, the region needed to build over a 5-year period, starting in 2020 through actually this year, we're already 4 years into it, at least 1,000 new single-family homes and 700 multifamily homes. And when we say multifamily, we really mean apartments, right, duplexes, things like that.
Yeah, and yeah, we've been tackling that here in the county. There's some developers stepping up to meet the need, and the Redevelopment Commission, Vincennes Redevelopment Commission, has offered some incentives to get people to develop here. So talk about some of the developments that are happening right now.
Sure. I think the three that I would describe as having the you know, the most chance of getting built include Beer House Flats, which we broke ground on earlier this month, right, which is a 240-unit market rate apartment complex that's going to be built just across the street from where the Kohl's sits, along Beer House Boulevard. And I think that'll go a long way to helping us attract new residents into Vincennes and Knox County. So there's Beer House Flats. There's a smaller project called Broadway Place, and that will include 13 duplex units and 2 single-family homes for a total of 28 new housing units. And then probably the most recent one that folks may have heard about is Firehouse Flats. So there's a developer out of Indianapolis called Anderson Partners that has an interest. They have a long record of historic preservation across the state, a number of projects in places like Evansville and Indianapolis and Crawfordsville, for example, and so they do a lot of great projects in addition to new construction, and so they're proposing to add as many as 98 new units right downtown. Wow. So I do think we have some bright spots. We're not keeping up nearly enough with our study suggested we needed to have if we were going to grow the population. And there are a few more in the works, primarily single-family developments, neighborhoods in the county that are being planned. Those are a little early to talk about, but I would say if all of the projects that I'm aware of come about, we could potentially add more than 500 new housing units in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years.
And you talked about how this relates to workforce development and a workforce. You and I have talked before, and the model now is, it used to be, build it and they will come.
Right.
But now we want people here so that they will build it. Is that kind of?
I mean, I do think there's a bit of a cart and a horse issue.
Right.
But if the pandemic, I think, taught us anything, it's that. And by the way, this is not unique to Knox County or Vincennes. Everyone I speak to, and not only is housing a tight market, but industrial buildings is also very tight. The majority of the attraction projects that we see are looking for existing building space. So that's a whole nother issue. But it's a similar, challenge to housing. But I think the connection between workforce availability, which happens to be probably the number one or number two issue for any business. So think about all of our existing businesses that, we have just over 3.3, 3.4 unemployment rate, which is truly full employment. I mean, you can't get much lower than that. And so I think folks should think about the fact that we've been living in a community whose pie has been shrinking, and we really need to have the attitude that it shouldn't stay the same. It needs to get bigger. So when we think about, when people say, "Oh, do we really need this many new housing units?" I would argue that we absolutely do, because if we don't, you can only shrink for so long before you become irrelevant. Companies, both existing companies and new companies looking at our community as a place to do business, workforce is the number one or number two issue. Energy happens to be becoming the number one issue, especially if you're a large energy user. But even still, we have got to address, and I think we are, but we've got to continue to put pressure on housing builds and those things, education, training. We happen to have a great partner in Vincennes University being in our backyard and being probably one of the most nimble and effective, manufacturing training programs in the state that, they can come in and tailor a program specifically to a company. So we have a lot of great things. We have a regional hospital that is fantastic. A lot of communities our size are very envious of the things that Vincennes and Knox County has. But I would argue that probably our number one challenge is continuing to put upward pressure on the number of housing units that we need.
Yeah. And we'll keep following that, and it's going to keep developing as the weeks and months and years go on. So we appreciate you being here. And
thank you very much.
All right. And keep up to date with the latest housing developments in the area by following Vincennes PBS News on air and online. It was one of the deadliest train wrecks in Indiana history, nearly forgotten today, but devastating to a regiment bound for the Civil War in the 1800s. As the nation braced for conflict, a tragic bridge collapse near Shoals killed over 24 soldiers and wounded more. Photojournalist Dave Novak gives us a closer look at the 1861 disaster and the lives it touched.
Earliest newspaper reportings, people suspected foul play from it. The idea that there were people among us that were traitors.
They said it was just like an opening in the woods. That was a description that I read.
Shoals, Indiana was settled in 1844, nestled along the East Fork of the White River and surrounded by forest. In 1857, it became a meeting point for a new mode of transportation.
That's what made Shoals. That's what brought it all here, because Shoals was a stop. It was a stop on the railroad.
A golden spike was driven in Shoals to celebrate the completion of a new railroad connecting Cincinnati and St. Louis, built by the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad Company. This connection linked Shoals to the rest of the country and to a tragedy that would occur in the years ahead.
That the 19th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment was serving out, doing guard duty out in Missouri. But then they had a call from the east for reinforcements. And they were part of a couple of regiments that were sent from Missouri to Washington, D.C. to reinforce what would become the famous Army of the Potomac. On their way, they were in two trains. When they passed through Martin County, Indiana, on the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad, they had come through shoals, and the first train came by and it went through just fine. About 15 minutes later, just before 9 o'clock at night, September 17th, 1861, the second train was coming through. And they passed over what was called Bridge 48, and when their train had passed over it, it had knocked a rail loose, and that knocked a trestle loose, and it basically, the car that came after it completely knocked it up, and then the cars that came after that just went tumbling down into the creek. The whole bridge collapsed as soon as the engine made it across, basically. In that wreck, 28 men died, 100 were wounded. 20 of the men were from Galena, Illinois, from Company I. And the reason that there was so much death in that company was because their car was the first one to go into the bottom of the creek. And the other cars behind them crushed them and came right on top of them. So a lot of men died, a lot of men drowned. It was really bad. After the wreck, initially what had happened was they had sent somebody to the nearest train stations that they could to telegraph that the accident had happened and to stop any other trains from coming through. A special train was sent down from Cincinnati, Ohio, to transport the men to an Army hospital. They were originally all going to be buried at Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio. The citizens of Galena, Illinois, 20 of their men had died all at once. And so they were very shocked and very obviously emotionally invested in what had happened to their loved ones. And so they petitioned that their mayor travel to Cincinnati to retrieve the bodies of the men, and he brings them back to Galena, Illinois. And they have a resolution that is passed by the citizens of Galena. And they basically say that we purchased this plot in the city cemetery and it's dedicated to these men and any other men that will die during this war. There's been rumors afoot, and you can see this even in the earliest newspaper recordings, that people suspected foul play from it. It certainly didn't help that a few years later, Jackson Ballard was murdered up here in Martin County, and they believe that was by a man associated with the Knights of the Golden Circle.
He was my great-grandmother's brother. He was a soldier. I mean, Jackson Ballard was a Union soldier. He was a private. They said he was on horseback, and he saw what they called the butternut flag, which was something that the Knights of the Golden Circle used to identify each other to other members. And he supposedly tore it down and stomped it. And this man said, "I'll get you for that." And then they were out looking, like I said, for this deserter, and he had only gone out just a little ways from where he was living, and they were laying in wait for him and shot him off his horse. We were north of the Mason-Dixon line for sure, but with a lot of the people coming in from the Carolinas and through Kentucky and Tennessee, there was a lot of Southern sympathy here for what a lot of them believed in.
Just the fact that a soldier on leave was murdered in the middle of the day or the middle of the night up here in the county really helped to foment that there was the idea that there were people among us that were traitors. The Knights of the Golden Circle was a pretty large group, pretty infamous group, underground society, really big in the Midwest, particularly in Indiana. But the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce hired a committee of practical engineers, people that worked on railroads. They hired them out to go out to the accident, and another separate committee did the same, and they both came to the same conclusion that they didn't believe that any foul play was suspected. They couldn't find anything that looked like it had been sawed or hacked away, like a timber. They thought, from the marks that they could see, that one of the rails had been popped up, one of the timbers had been popped up whenever the locomotive had made it across, and that snagged on one of the following cars, and that's what caused the accident, and the other committee came substantially to the same result. some of the stuff that we do, like whenever you're talking about dedicating monuments.
Taylon Allen's passion for history has fueled his research and collaboration with members of the Martin County Historical Society who share his commitment to preserving and sharing the region's past.
The more that anybody, I think, chases something that they're passionate about, you kind of run into people, you stumble into people that are just as passionate about it as you are. I'd gotten a call from a member of the Historical Society, and he said, "You won't believe it, but we were just talking about this train wreck last week."
And working with the Martin County Historical Society, and then we started fundraising together and getting other things together with that to get the Willow Valley accident remembered, because soldiers, they died in service of their country.
We originally started out, it was I wanted to get a monument. I was like, I think a monument with all the names of the men that died would be appropriate. We pondered a little bit whether or not we would get a state historical marker or some like bronze marker or something like that would just have the very short end of the story. And we ultimately decided that was going to be a little too expensive, but then also it was just going to be more appropriate to be able to give some visuals to the story, to have a large sign that could have pictures on it, because there's a picture of the wreck, there's a picture of Captain Howard, we've got a picture of the cemetery where a lot of the men were buried. It would go a long way to really kind of evoking emotion out of people when they read it. I'm trying to get the Sons of Union veterans more established in southern Indiana. So I'm trying to make a camp up here in Martin County or in Orange County, Indiana, just sort of serve as a base of volunteers to do more projects like this. Because I'm sure that somebody out there has probably got another story that's just as interesting.
He's very interested in the Civil War and things that went on during the Civil War. I'm so glad, because it's nice to see somebody, younger people, carry on, the love of history.
You can revisit this story by following our History Vault series on the Vincennes PBS YouTube channel. And while you're there, be sure and subscribe. As you likely know, one of Knox County's best-known features is the watermelon grown right here. The homegrown favorite was the main, but not the only attraction at the Chamber of Commerce's Watermelon Festival. First City Focus photojournalist Tessa Haig shares her visit to the festival.
The sweet taste of summer was on full display the first weekend of August in Knox County, as the 2025 Watermelon Festival brought people together for food, fun, and a little friendly competition. Each year, families from across the area gather in Vincennes to celebrate all things watermelon, from watermelon eating contests to watermelon samples. It's a festival that blends tradition and community pride. Among the highlights, this year's pageant winners, who are already making their mark.
So I did it last year, and I've always enjoyed the Watermelon Festival, so I thought I'd give something new a try, and it's always good to build up your self-confidence, your speeches when you're talking, so it was really exciting to be able to do it again this year.
For Kendall Quarterman, being crowned Miss Watermelon 2025 was more than just a title. It was a moment of personal growth and a way to give back.
I'm really excited for Ag Day to go and work with kids and be able to see kids. I know I get to work with some watermelon things during that day.
For her, the Watermelon Festival is more than an annual event. It's about community.
I feel like it really brings the community together. I feel like this community is very strong. The citizens are all very close tight. You go to Walmart, you know somebody. So I feel like being able to have a big event like this is really nice to get to see friends, family, and just meet new people in general.
That same sense of togetherness brings even the youngest participants to the spotlight. 1-year-old Gianna stole the show in the 13 to 24 month category.
She loves just dancing and dressing up, so we just figured it'd be fun to put her in it.
Her mother, Kayla, says the festival is something they look forward to every year.
I think it's great for the community because they get to come together and just relax and have a great weekend.
Every year, the Miss Watermelon pageant brings the community together in the name of tradition, and Kendall encourages the younger generation to continue on that tradition.
If you want to enter this pageant or any pageant in general, do it. If you're nervous, do it anyways. You're always going to build self-confidence. You're going to meet new friends. I've made so many friends through this, and it's just nice. It's fun to do.
With pageant crowns, sweet slices, and smiling faces, the 2025 Watermelon Festival once again proves that in Knox County, tradition and community go hand in hand. With First City Focus, I'm Tessa Haig.
Thank you, Tessa. The Watermelon Festival, just one more reason summer in Knox County is hard to beat. In this episode's final focus, we take you to Brown County State Park, where they held their annual Snake Fest in July, proving that not all summer festivals are about sweet treats, beauty pageants, and fireworks.
We are known for timber rattlesnakes here.
The rattle is not hollow, it's made up of interlinking pieces of skin.
Yeah, so in our park we have 2 venomous snakes. We have our timber rattlesnake and our eastern copperhead. The timber rattlesnake is the most venomous snake in Indiana, but as I mentioned during our program, we have 0 rattlesnake bites on record. That's because it's a very polite snake. It'll rattle when you're too close to it. Copperheads are more camouflaged, so that darker brown, orange, rusty color. So they're harder to see, so those bites are more common and people accidentally step on them. No snake ever wants to bite you. They only bite when we scare them.
Again, tell me what kind of snake this is.
This is a Mexican burrowing python, which despite the name, they're not actually pythons at all. We used to think they were, but they're just such a weird little snake that we're still kind of figuring them out. Well, most people tend to fear snakes, and a lot of people want to, learn more about the things that they fear, because that's the cure to fear, is knowledge. Knowledge really is power, and they're just not really another animal quite like this, right? Absolutely fascinating, both in just their biology, but also the culture surrounding them. There's so many myths, just...
It's awesome.
They're amazing.
You'll notice you didn't see me rushing to grab a snake. Some things are better admired from a distance. That's all for this edition of our First City Focus. For everyone here at Vincennes PBS, I'm Dave Foster. Join us again next week.
First City Focus is supported in part by Duke Energy, powering the lives of its customers and communities. Online at duke-energy.com. Andy Ellerman of First City Wealth, serving Vincennes and surrounding communities to help with investing and planning for your future before and during retirement years. First City Wealth online at firstcitywealth.com. Colonial Assisted Living. Colonial is an assisted living residence, promoting independence and dignity for each resident while providing the necessary assistance for daily living. Colonial Assisted Living, 1622 South Hart Street Road in Vincennes, 812-895-1504. And by donations contributed by Vincennes PBS viewers like you. Thank you.